Hello. Hello. I see Marley and I see Dean. Is everybody here? Is everybody able to get into the Hangout? I'm seeing in the lower left-hand screen it says 0 viewers. So if you're on and you're able to get into the Hangout, please speak up. Need to hear you. Trying to get this to work. Marley, are you able to hear this? Geez, now I don't want to broadcast. I don't want to load that app. I want to do the control room. Okay. Hello. Okay. All right. Marley. Dean. Okay. Hello, guys. I'm waiting to, hear back. I see a couple viewers trying to get in. Marley and Dean, if you're there and you can hear me, please speak up. Because it's kind of hard for me to do this by myself. I need Marley to ask me questions about the app. Hello? Okay, well, I'm going to try to wing this as best as I can. I don't understand why Google is acting a fool and why people who are showing that they accepted the invite and are watching are not able to get into the Hangout to participate. That's very problematic. Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to start by explaining what this project is. The original name I thought for it was a lot less eloquent than NGO Fraudbuster. But that's basically what this app does. This app is a very extensive, data-rich application that I'm working on first as a console project in F#, bootstrapping it, and we'll be probably using JavaScript for the front end. To turn it into a full-blown web app after the back end with the database and the data modeling is completely configured to where it's supposed to be. What this app is it's going to be a web app that will allow survivors, victims, and advocates, or advocates of victims and survivors of human sex trafficking to report the outcomes of their requests for help to these various different charities and anti-trafficking non-government organizations, which is a fancy word for charity, and what the outcomes of the requests for help were. The survivors, the victims, and the advocates will be able to report anonymously, as in they won't have to divulge any, personally identifying information about themselves that could put their safety at risk. As a result of reporting, to the app. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put you on everybody on screen share so you can see a demo of how this very early stage of what I'm building out, what will be built out to be a full blown data-rich data mining application, where the gist of this is going. The reason why this project is so important and so necessary is because according to the General Accounting Office, the GAO, with the United States government, approximately 50 of the top prominent anti-trafficking charities and NGOs are sharing approximately $686 million a year between them. And that's a conservative estimate, and that's based solely on government monies. That's not including additional donations from the public that are obtained through high-powered charity fundraising drives that are raised by professional fundraisers such as DCSMS and Traffic Jam. And the issue came about that, you know, there's this amount of money breaks down to approximately $343,000 that these organizations are receiving per trafficking survivor that they claim to be helping. And yet, you don't need to spend more than 10 minutes in any anti-trafficking group on any social media site or in land space and physical space for that matter to quickly learn that the majority of destitute sex trafficking survivors are not getting helped with what they need to rebuild their lives. They're not getting helped with medical care, dental care, housing, economic support while they try to rebuild their lives. So there's a big problem. And you know, the lack of accountability is creating such a huge issue that it's hurting the organizations that are doing good, anti-trafficking organizations that are, you know, going above and beyond the call of duty even, who are hurting and not, you know, able to raise funds as easily because, you know, the bad apples are spoiling it for the rest of the barrel. And in around all this, you've got, you know, trafficking victims, you know, poor women, marginalized women and girls who are literally dying, you know, because of not being able to get helped. They're left to literally beg for food and for personal hygiene products and left to die under a bridge. Okay, this is a problem. Now, when we're talking about public monies through the U.S. government, through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services funding, you know, any kind of humanitarian aid organization, whether it's anti-trafficking, whether it's poverty relief, whether it's disaster relief. When an organization, you know, receives that money, they need to be accountable not only to the public, taxpayers who are paying for this, and to the government who is dispensing this funding, but they ultimately also need to be accountable to the very demographic they purport to be helping. And that is what this app and this project aims to encourage. So that way, money is not directed to the wrong places and to the wrong people. Okay? The way it works is this. You know, a caller or somebody requesting help from an organization or somebody who is being served by one of these organizations can report anonymously to this app the name of the organization, the type of help that the organization purports to provide, whether or not, you know, that help was afforded to a poor sex trafficking victim or survivor or not, and whether or not, you know, they were referred to down the referral pipeline of further NGOs, you know, instead of being helped, saying, well, you know, okay, for example, you call For example, sake of argument, suppose you call Polaris, and Polaris, says, well, we can't help you with the dental care and, the economic support you need for, to keep a roof over your head, but we can refer you to this other anti-trafficking charity over here. And they refer you, and you get a number, and you call them. You can report whether or not, any caseworker followed up with you to make sure you got helped, and you can also report the outcome of the follow-up call. When you are then referred to the next NGO or the next charity, did they help you? Did they offer you the wrong help? And when I say wrong help, for example, a homeless survivor might get referred to the food bank by one of these NGOs in the referral pipeline. Well, if you think about it, that's a little silly, because if you're homeless, if you're living under a bridge or in a tent city, you've got nowhere to cook food. That would be an example of being offered the wrong help. So to give you a demonstration of how this app works so far, I'm going to put everybody on screen share so you can see what this looks like. Let me just minimize some of these windows here because this is a pain in the butt. Okay, now everybody can see my lovely desktop of my computer and this purple see-through looking thing that I just popped open. That's a computer terminal. Developers spend a lot of time in terminal. So when you're in terminal, you want a terminal that looks nice. In other words, hands off my Z shell. Sorry, just had to throw that out there. Hands off my Z shell. When I started this, it was initially at the suggestion of several survivors in the survivor movement to build an app that would rate Polaris. Because Polaris is the biggest anti-trafficking NGO in the United States and possibly in the world. And Polaris receives the lion's share of anti-trafficking funding. And there have been good reports coming back about Polaris and bad reports. So just to try to clear through all the brouhaha, I thought, well, there's one way to solve this problem. How about I build an app, put on my problem solving hat here, because that's what software engineers do. How about I build an app that records and indexes and catalogs the outcomes of help requests made by victims, survivors, and advocates. Now, a victim is somebody who is in a sex trafficking situation, who's just being pulled out of it, and they're in need of a safe house, or they might be a resident in a safe house. A survivor is typically somebody who has escaped their sex trafficking situation a long time ago, and they've been struggling to rebuild their lives ever since. And that's typically the way they call it. Now, some survivors like to be called overcomers, whatever. And then there's advocates. Advocates would be like, another person, acting on behalf of or supporting a survivor or a victim. And an advocate could also be a survivor themselves. There are survivors who have, granted small cash-strapped organizations that they would be in a position to report anonymously to the app as an advocate instead of disclosing as a survivor. And there you can see my lovely IDE, mono develop. This is what we use for F#. And that's the programming language that this app is based on because of its pattern matching capabilities. And here's one of the things that I'm building into the app. It will also ask about which, are the survivors who've, been out a while, who, have educations, who have built up skill sets, who are applying for jobs in the field to help other trafficking victims. And they're applying for jobs with these NGOs. One of the features of the app will allow a survivor to choose whether or not they want to report this information if they sought employment with an NGO and what the outcome was. Does that NGO have a policy of not hiring the sex trafficking survivors that they are getting, all this anti-trafficking money to supposedly help? So that will be a feature in the app too. And here's an example of how that might work. Are you reporting as a survivor that sought employment? Enter 1 if you contacted an NGO as a job applicant. 2 if you contacted an NGO as a contractor consultant. 3 if you contacted an NGO as a survivor-owned vendor. Yes, we have self-employed survivors that are struggling just to provide for themselves by selling healthcare products and soap and books and what have you. So they would be considered a survivor-owned vendor. One of them has a catering business, by the way, in New York. I can't pronounce the young woman's name, but she's actually bootstrapping her own catering business. So that would be an example of a survivor-owned vendor. And then the 4th option here is if you contacted an NGO for help and an NGO for a job. Because at different points in time, a survivor, who's struggling in destitution, who has no income, because we have no real safety net in America. We have, thanks to welfare reform, there's no economic safety net for the jobless poor. So for a long time, a survivor might be without any income while they're trying to get their prostitution records expunged that were incurred as a direct result of having been trafficked. And these records, classify a survivor of sex trafficking as criminals, specifically as sexual criminals, as sex offenders, which kneecaps a survivor for being able to get employment in most places, even McDonald's or Walmart. So work opportunities, economic opportunities for being able to survive are very, very, very few and far between for survivors who have not yet gotten any benefit of expungement or complete vacation of prostitution records incurred as a direct result of having previously been trafficked. So being able to get employment at an anti-trafficking NGO is pretty important. I mean, if nobody else will hire you, who will? And that's for the survivors who manage to get college educations and acquire skills. So I think, after talking with the other survivor leaders, this was a pretty important thing to have included in the app. So I'm going to demonstrate this now, saying, okay, you might be a survivor who contacted an NGO for help while you were jobless and struggling to find money to put a roof over your head and afford your next meal. And at another point in time, where you contacted an NGO after you completed an education program or a skills training program and you applied for a job. So we're going to go with number 4. Say you're a survivor who contacted both an NGO for help and for a job. And they might be different NGOs, but it's the unmet needs of the survivor at different points in time. So that's an option to enter. Now you enter the job title you applied for. Well, let's say this is a survivor who struggled around the obstacles of extreme poverty to build IT skills, to learn software development. So we're going to say, okay, suppose this survivor applied for a job at an NGO using those skills for a position that was IT related. So we're going to put IT and enter the name of the NGO you applied for a job at. Well, I know that Thorn Foundation is an anti-trafficking charity that they don't provide services to victims and survivors, but what they do is they're strictly a cyber oriented NGO that specializes in scrubbing the internet of child pornography images. Now, my own background as a software developer, I know a little bit about using the Mogrify feature of ImageMagick to scrub malware from images that were uploaded to websites. So I can understand, I could see a survivor applying for a job like that with Thorn Foundation, right? That's very possible. And now, after reporting that, because you're reporting as a survivor who contacted an NGO for help, as well as another NGO for a job, you're brought to this set of prompts where you're asked, are you reporting as a victim, survivor, or advocate, bringing you to the help building menu, the menu of what the outcomes were for your requests for help. So we're going to say, okay, you're reporting as a survivor. That would be option number 2. And what help did you request? Victim services, well, that would be for people who are trying to get out of forced prostitution or who have just been what they call rescued, but they don't have a shelter bed or a safe house bed yet. And then there's 2 for survivor support and assistance. That's for survivors of sex trafficking who've been out a while but are struggling just to be able to survive. And then number 3 is something you would enter if you were requesting help for reporting a trafficking situation in progress. This would be, for example, you're on your way on your lunch break to a coffee shop. There's a nerd convention in town because, Ruby conferences in town, and you're on your way to a coffee shop and you see a trafficking situation in progress going down on your way to the eatery. This is not, something impossible. This actually does happen. You would be able to, as an anonymous witness, call and report to Polaris that there's a trafficking situation in progress. That's what they have that $10 million hotline, anti-trafficking hotline, for. To report a trafficking situation in progress. So this menu here allows you to report to the app what kind of help you requested. Now, this is just a bare bones skeleton. This will be built out a lot further so that it makes a lot more sense by the time it's converted into a web app from a console app, just so everybody's clear on that. So we're going to say, okay, your survivor who's reporting, and we're going to enter number 2 for survivor support and assistance. And what unmet needs did you request help with? You can choose several of these, but not at the same time. So you have to, basically enter one at a time. So we're going to say, well, okay, based on what a lot of destitute survivors need help with, we're going to say dental, because, Johns do knock your teeth out. Pimps knock their teeth out. So this is very common. Dental. We enter another one, medical. And we can enter trauma therapy. Well, let's see. What else might a survivor need? Well, a survivor might need permanent housing. They might need skills training. They might need job placement. And let's say that's all the survivor needed, and they hit done. Now, this is based on whether or not, the survivor called Polaris. This is going to be changed in the final stage of deployment to what help did the first NGO that you contacted provide? Because Polaris might not be, although it's the biggest one, it might not be the first one that a victim, survivor, or an advocate calls. So while this did start out with the idea of it being an app to grade Polaris's performance for victim services, several survivor leaders thought it would be a good idea if it was not just targeting any particular NGO, because that Polaris might not be the first NGO that they call for help. So in the final version, it will be, what help did the very first NGO you called provide? But right now in the early stage demo, it still says Polaris. So bear with me on this. So we're going to say, okay, as a survivor, we have the option to press 1 if the NGO provided victim and survivor aid to you, if you got the help you needed. Number 2, if the operator at the anti-trafficking hotline dispatched 911 to the trafficking situation in progress. We have option number 3 to enter if you were referred to another NGO. Option number 4 for if you were not helped at all, not even referred to anyone. And number 5 is if your call to the hotline, to the anti-trafficking hotline, got dropped or disconnected, which would be a technical repair issue. So we're going to say, for sake of argument, based on what a lot of survivor feedback has been, that the survivor gets referred to another NGO, which would be option number 3. And now you see, well, what kind of NGO were you referred to? Were you referred to a sex trafficking victim safe house, an emergency homeless shelter, a charity for general poverty relief, an organization of doctors and dentists who are providing survivor medical and dental care pro bono, or just for survivor, general survivor aid in general? So let's choose number 5. That would cover, a gamut of things. And let's enter the name of the NGO that you were referred to by the first NGO. Well, okay, let's say, for sake of example, you were referred to Shared Hope. They're a big anti-trafficking NGO. And now you're asked, did anyone follow up with you? That means, was there a caseworker assigned to work with you to follow up to make sure that you either got helped or got a referral to another organization that, was able to and willing to help you? That's what this next menu screen means. Did anyone follow up? In most cases, nobody is following up. Nobody is following up with any of the survivors to see if they're getting the help they need. So the third option is, of course, now self-reporting, no caseworker follow-up. And here you're asked, well, what kind of help did you get from the NGO you were referred to? What kind of help did you get? Well, you either got all the help you needed, or number 2 is you got re-exploited or abused at the safe house. There have been reports of that happening, by the way, where in some of the faith-based run safe houses, Christian counselors sexually assaulted some of the residents and threatened to call Child Protective Services on them if they told anyone, and reminded them in so many words that, well, I'm an upstanding citizen and you're nothing but a prostitute. Who's the court gonna believe? And these are the kind of things that need to be exposed and need to be corrected by the organizations that are receiving money from the government and from the public. And here, so this would enable, a survivor to report that. And that would include if they witnessed that situation going on as well. Option number 3 is if the survivor was not helped and all options were exhausted. Option number 4, if they were denied help, or they called the NGO that they were referred to and they were told, well, sorry, we can't help you. Number 5, you were offered the wrong help. Well, you needed housing, but they sent you to the soup kitchen. Well, that's the wrong help. And number 6, you were not helped, but you were referred to another NGO. So we're going to say, okay, the survivor was referred to another NGO. Now, what kind of NGO were you referred to? And you're again brought back through this recursive loop, this recursive set of data points. that you're asked all over again. Well, what kind of NGO were you referred to? One for General Survivor Aid, one for Sex Trafficking Victim Safe House. So we're going to say General Survivor Aid, or no, this time we're going to say, let's see, we're going to say homeless shelter. You know, that this was the NGO they were referred to by the second NGO that they were referred to. They were referred to Salvation Army. Okay. And this is actually based on an actual situation. Did anyone follow up with you? Yes, no, self-reporting, no follow-up. What kind of help did you get? Not helped, and all options were exhausted. And now you can see this is the record of what is being entered into the database. It was a survivor who was reporting to the app. They needed survivor aid. Their unmet needs were dental, medical, trauma therapy, permanent housing, skills training, job placement. And the first NGO referred them to another NGO. The type of NGO they were referred to, the category is survivor assistance, and the name of the NGO, Shared Hope. And you know, it's reported that the person reporting to the app is not being followed up with a caseworker. They're self-reporting to the app. It's not a caseworker. And the outcome of their trying to get help was not helped, but referred to another NGO. And the type of NGO they referred to, the third NGO, they were referred to was, you know, of course, a homeless shelter, Salvation Army. And again, you know, self-reporting, no follow-up. And what was the outcome? Exhausted all referrals and still not helped. So what this will do is this will provide a snapshot of where organizations need to make improvement, on where organizations need to, you know, really be held more accountable for the money that they're getting, and also how the public can step up and try to take self-corrective measures. That's one thing I want to say about the IT community. There are organizations like Railsbridge and the Ada Academy that are geared towards helping, you know, economically disadvantaged women get into and learn computer programming and software development. I mean, it's not only for economically disadvantaged women, but, you know, a lot of women tend to be poor. So due to, you know, systemic discrimination and structural inequalities. And the IT community is has, you know, great groups like Railsbridge and like Ada, which are seeking to try to address that, to increase diversity in, you know, in the IT field. IT jobs are good jobs. Why shouldn't a poor woman have that as an option instead of being trafficked? Makes sense to me. So from what I've observed, those organizations in IT that are reaching out to help disadvantaged and marginalized, underrepresented people who have an interest in learning programming, who have an interest in pursuing an IT career, they're not anywhere near well as funded as, as a lot of other charities are. It's typically the IT community funding this themselves. And I've heard nothing but good reports from the people who participated in those programs. So this is not, by any means, this app is not to besmirch to besmirch charities and NGOs in general. But there is a significant problem specifically in the anti-trafficking sector and the poverty relief sector, where there's a lot of waste and there's a lot of people that are not being helped, and yet there's organizations getting, piles of money to supposedly provide that help. And although there are sites like GuideStar and Charity Navigator where a person can go on the internet to research whether or not a particular charity, is on the up and up, the information listed at GuideStar or at Charity Navigator is based solely on what the NGO themselves are disclosing, not on what the intended beneficiaries or recipients of aid are disclosing. When people say, well, there's all this help out there for the poor, there's all this help out there for poor trafficked women, is there really? Nobody seems to have a clear picture on the sheer numbers of people who seek help, the numbers who are helped versus the vast larger numbers who are turned away, juxtaposed against the backdrop of hundreds of millions of dollars from federal block grant monies alone, not including state block grants and not including public donations to charity drives, high-powered charity drives. So I think, what would really help us, what would really be of good service here to the public and to everybody involved, is if there was a means to actually get a clear picture. And this app is a solution to that problem. It provides a clear picture. People who are able to report the outcomes of their calls or the requests for help. They're able to report the good and the bad. And the names and the dates, the final app will, the person reporting will be able to enter the dates that they contacted each NGO that they tried to get help from. Or the advocate will be able to report the dates that they, called on behalf of a victim or a survivor, the dates that they contacted each NGO. So, if anything, it really would behoove a lot of these NGOs to keep very meticulous call records. So that way, that would certainly cut down on any problems through, shall we say, malicious reporting from somebody who's not really an advocate or a victim or a survivor, and they're just out to get an organization. A meticulously kept call record compared with, what's reported to this app will go a long way in cutting down on that abuse as well. And to see how this works with the data points, we're now going to go look over here, because in the early stages of testing this, I'm writing to a file, I'm not writing to a database. So we're going to go look at, I can't type. We're going to go look at where the JSON file, this right now is being written to a JSON file. I'm not sure until I talk with one of the other developers, the senior developer. I'm the project's architect, and I'm a developer, but I'm not a senior dev. But I'm going to, meet with the senior dev this week, tomorrow to be precise, to discuss whether or not we should have a feature for writing the data to XML as well as JSON, a JSON file for parsing and compiling reports on all this data. So now we're going to take a look at the JSON file, that all that information that we just reported to the app, to the demo. And you can see that this is the information. You can see the case, the call, and the fields. Well, the case is a survivor. They reported survivor assistance. These are all objects, JSON objects. These all represent data points in a data tree. And what this app will do is it will take the information in this JSON file or in a database, and count the number of people seeking help, whether for themselves or on behalf of another, from these NGOs, from each NGO that they contact. And that will be counted as, total number of calls from people reporting to the app, the number of positive outcomes that materialized in actual help, versus the number of outcomes of where, the victim or the survivor wasn't being helped, or in some horrific cases, maybe even actually being abused or re-exploited at a victim safe house. Another example is a case where another survivor in a survivor group mentioned how the residents were forced to make clothing and jewelry. They weren't able to keep any of the proceeds, but this clothing and jewelry that they were making was being sold by the NGO at charity fundraising events and marketed to the public as, if you buy this, you're supporting, putting a destitute sex trafficking survivor back on her feet. Except that the survivors weren't getting any of the money. That didn't happen. The NGO was getting money. And then at the end of those women's stays at those transitional housing facilities, as they're called, they left with, maybe one or two changes of clothes, and if they were lucky, a bus pass, but, no money from all the jewelry and the clothing that they were forced to make for free. Now, for those of you who are socially conscious and you care about free-range eggs and you care about not buying chocolate because it was made with slave labor, I should think that, this would be something to elicit concern, because buying jewelry and clothing made by slave labor of people who are already the most exploited, disprivileged, and marginalized group of people is absolutely despicable. And I think maybe the public might want to know that. So this is the type of information, and it's represented in all these data points, that will build a scorecard or a report card of sorts for each NGO being reported to this app. And it kind of operates on a similar basis as Experian does when you have a credit report. When you apply for a car loan or you get utilities or an apartment in your name, if you miss a payment or you screw up or whatever, it's reported to your credit report, and you have the option to get that cleared up if somebody or if a creditor misrepresents the situation. But it costs you some money to do it. You have to pay to clean up your credit report. You have to pay to clear up an old bill. You pay to settle your debts. And that's pretty much the same thing with if you're somebody who, let's say, Intellius. And that's what this app is going to be similar to. It's going to be similar to like Intellius on steroids, except instead of providing dossiers on individuals, it provides dossiers on tax-exempt nonprofit organizations that are anti-trafficking charities and poverty relief charities. So that's basically the principle of this. And the organizations being reported, they will have the opportunity to rebut or challenge a report, but they're going to have to produce proof. They're going to have to produce substantial proof. And no, their say-so is not good enough. They actually have to produce substantial proof, such as a call log, a call log to show what really happened, if that survivor really, if that person reporting as a survivor really actually called that, NGO, that a survivor called that NGO on that day requesting help. They will actually have to show proof that, no, here's a canceled check. We actually did help this survivor with the economic support he or she needed to rebuild their lives. And they're going to have to pay a fee to have the database amended to reflect that accordingly. Members of the public who would like to see extensive dossiers and reports on the outcomes of of help requests will also pay a subscription fee, but it'll, be a lot, a small, very small fee, which is why I'm seeking investment funding through the GoFundMe, because I want to try to make this affordable for the public at large. But at the same time, there has to be a fee structure built in, because the database has to constantly be maintained, and security has to constantly be maintained too. And that costs money. It costs money because computers aren't free, the internet's not free, electric's not free. And guess what? Software developers need to eat too. This is what we do for a living. We solve problems. This is my solution, or part of a solution to a larger set of solutions for solving the problem of a lot of survivors, a lot of sex trafficking survivors that are destitute, that are not getting helped, and a lack of accountability and clarity from a lot of groups that are getting piles of money, some who probably should not be, while others are unfortunately forced to close their doors. So that is what this app will basically, will do when it's finished. This is its bare bones skeleton minimum that I just started building out. And as you can see, it's quite extensive. The data points, this is only a small portion of the data points that you're seeing right now. When this app, if this project is funded to what I need to work on it full time, to what my senior dev and the junior dev that I'm mentoring needs to be paid to work on this full time, this will actually represent data points that would scroll off of this screen. It would include a lot of other situations that are germane to this application's purpose, and to the purpose of accountability from NGOs. So anyway, if anybody has any questions at all about this, technical or otherwise, feel free to hit me up on Gmail. Feel free to hit me up on Google Chat. Feel free to hit me up on Facebook. I try to stay away from Facebook anymore. That's kind of a time sink. But hit me up on Google. I'm in a Ruby circle. I'm in PHP circles, and if there's an F# circle anywhere, there's very few F# devs. I'm an F# dev. I just started, actually started learning this language a month ago when I started by building this app. And the reason why I chose F#, although I came from first learning Ruby, which is a purely object-oriented programming language, and went with this, which is a functional first programming language, and it's .NET. Well, it's not strictly .NET, but it is very .NET leaning, is because of the capabilities to mathematically model real-life problems through a very intricate system that the language uses with pattern matching and recursion. And as you can see how this particular project needs to be structured, it would really be a task of Sisyphus to try to do this in a language that did not provide that capabilities. And the only two languages I know of that do are F# and Haskell. There might be others, but I didn't learn them yet. I only have 2 years software developer experience. Excuse me. But give me 2 more years and I'll have 4 more languages under my belt. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the app. And this is mono developed. I'm using I use Linux because I refuse to dev on Windows, and I can't afford a Mac. So there we go. All right. Now, any questions? Anybody want to join in the chat and ask a question? JacquelineHoman7 at gmail.com or CodeCatNation@gmail.com if you have any questions. You can actually, and I'll paste this here in the window. If you want to support and invest in this project, there are various tier levels of reward. This is not asking for donations. I'm asking for investment in my work and in this project, and that means, yes, I'm inviting people to become stakeholders based on how much they contribute to support this. So if you wish to contribute to support this and you wish to invest in this, I'm going to get for you right now the link to the GoFundMe. So you can, contribute whatever level you feel comfortable with. If you feel that, this is an app that would serve a real value, a real social good, responsible investment. And I'll get you the link right now as I go over here and paste it. And I don't know if everybody can see this. If you can't, hit me up on Gmail. You know what to do. Right here is the link, and I just pasted this in the chat, in the group chat window, in the Hangout window, for the fundraiser, for the investment that I'm seeking for this project. And I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight, and I look forward to some input. Roger Wilco, over and out.